We are the poet, the pastor, and the pundit, opining each week on the intersections of faith and politics. We come to you from First Congregational United Church of Christ in DeKalb, Illinois. We hope you enjoy what you hear. Thank you for listening. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of The Poet, the Pastor, and the Pundit podcast, where we opine on the intersection of faith and politics. Our poet, Becky, is not able to be with us this week, so in her stead, we have a book of Emily Dickinson's poetry, her favorite poet, and we wish her well. I think she's visiting some family. So, well, there's quite a bit to talk about this week. First, how are you doing? It's been a tough week.
It's been a tough week, but it's like each week seems to get tougher and then more accepted. And that's the scary part.
We talked about that here. In fact, I preached on that a couple of weeks ago, how we normalize the abnormal and accept the unacceptable.
Correct.
A very recent example of that, we're recording the day after it was announced that Jimmy Kimmel Live is being suspended and probably canceled. I don't know that he'll be back. And I think, this is the second such episode. Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel. Our president has now said he wants Seth Meyers and Jimmy Fallon off the air.
Right, because they have no talent.
No talent, zero talent.
No talent. Big ratings, but no talent.
And, once that gets normalized, it sets the stage for what's next, which in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's murder sounds something like, if you say anything that this government disagrees with, you become an enemy of the state, you become a domestic terrorist, we can seize your property, we can throw you in jail.
Exactly.
That's what's coming next. And once we normalize this, that then becomes also.
And the thing is, there's historical precedent for that. It's not as if we invented this.
We did not invent it.
This is a playbook of Nazi Germany that he is choosing to follow. That's what I think my peers and I are just shaking our heads. Like, where were you when they were talking about World War II and the Holocaust? Where were you?
I had a conversation with my son this morning. He was upset about Jimmy Kimmel, and he was expressing his own fears about what that meant. And I talked to him about this sort of calculation I've been making since the day of Trump's election, which are, what are the odds that before the 4 years are over, I end up in jail? And I've been a very public figure. I've publicly opposed Trump's policies first term, now in this term. And I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that I and clergy like me are going to be in the same place Martin Niemöller was in 1936 in Germany.
Interesting.
In a concentration camp somewhere.
I'm smiling, but I it's not beyond the realm of possibility. It's not that far-fetched.
This isn't sort of idle contemplation for me.
Right.
I have a real fear about this. And I had to talk to my son this morning about that.
I'm horribly sad to hear that.
Right.
I mean, I made a joke when Stephen Miller came out and called those of us who were rallying, the senior white hairs, and we're old, we're 80, we should go home and take a nap.
White hippies.
I was kind of laughing at him because he's too young to remember the hippie days, and I never considered myself a hippie. But then my friend said, you've been kind of outspoken. Maybe you ought to, tone it down a little bit. And I'm in a small corner of the world. I'm really not that worried about it. And then I started thinking, they could knock on my door. And I thought, well, I better make sure I'm dressed all the time, not running around, in the buff, in the privacy of my own home. And then I thought again, I said, maybe I should be running around in the buff. So when they knock on the door, I scare the crap out of them, and make them go away. So, yeah, I mean, that's part of making fun of something that's too horrible to contemplate. And yet, it's in the back of your mind.
It is in the back of your mind. And with each new step that gets
Mm,
normalized, the next radical thing that we never imagined possible
right,
becomes even more possible.
right.
And yeah, that worries the heck out of me. And one of the other things that we're now normalizing is not only is our president talking about in the administration sending first immigrants and refugees to places like Rwanda and Somalia
Mm,
and El Salvador and gulags.
right.
They're, they're doing that
Yeah,
and threatening more. And when all of a sudden I'm a domestic terrorist
right.
because I chose to say something about Charlie Kirk that this government doesn't like,
Hmm.
I've authorized that government to seize me, and ending up in jail is a would be a fantasy compared to what might happen to me in Somalia or El Salvador or
Right. I, one of the things you're kind of touching on it, I wrote about it before. I think it was the first administration, the first corrupt administration. It might have been the second, but anyway, Trump awarded a medal, a non-military Medal of Honor to a major donor to his
correct.
campaign, and I can't remember, Adelson, I believe,
Hmm.
Mrs. Adelson. And I took offense of that because my husband had been in the military, had served in Vietnam, and he didn't do anything extraordinary enough
Yeah.
to earn a Medal of Honor. Yet, how disrespectful to all those who
Served,
served
suffered,
and in
sacrificed.
sacrificed and in many cases gave their lives. And now, I'm sorry, we're contemplating giving it to a young man named Charlie Kirk.
So let's talk about this. There are aspects of Charlie Kirk's murder that I think uh, need commentary from those of us who are opining on the intersections
Right.
of faith and politics. One of those aspects is the lionizing of a man whose public speech was about as offensive
Hmm.
as you get.
Hmm.
And I won't talk about his politics, but we can talk about his faith. For example, he has said publicly that the stoning of gay men
Hmm.
is God's perfect law.
Hmm.
Now, you're part of an open and affirming
Hmm.
church.
Hmm.
How do you, as a person of faith, respond to a leader like this being lionized by the White House who said openly, the stoning of gay men is God's perfect law?
I I've always tried to put myself in this position because I haven't always been an open and affirming church member. I was raised in a
Nor
different
have
faith.
I. I was raised in a faith that taught me, and long before I knew it was okay to question that.
It was quite judgmental and so forth.
There, yes.
But along the way, I've always had the feeling, truly the feeling, that God has spoken to me and I have felt directed. And I have felt that because of that, God has spoken through me in my speech or in my writing. And my example of the writing is I'm going along writing from my own brain, and all of a sudden I'm reading, I'm going, boy, that's pretty good. That didn't come from me. That is coming through me.
Yes.
So when someone purports to speak for God,
Mm.
I, that's a line I can't cross. I'm not sure that that's faith. I think that's ego. I think that's politics. I think that's a personal vendetta, but I don't see that as faith.
And this God that you have this relationship with that you feel speaks through you, and that I claim is best understood through the lens of God is love. This God, do you hear that God saying, my perfect law requires you to stone gay men to death?
Hardly,
Hardly.
hardly. And really, given the scope of our country, given the scope of the world, how many people are actually saying that? Are there people standing up and say, yes, I'm with you. Next time I see a gay person, I'm going to pick up a rock and throw it at him.
Well, we'll find out.
I,
But it's one thing for a religious public figure to say that.
mhm.
It's another thing for the President of the United
Hmm.
States upon his death, his
Hmm.
murder,
Hmm.
which I abhor,
I
and we can
abhor.
talk about that, to then ask the, the government to lower our flags to half-mast
Oh, oh, yeah.
and to lionize him
Hmm.
as a saint. And then his public speech, offensive as it is, becomes a part of what we normalize.
Exactly. I'm, along with the Medal of Honor, the lowering of our flags for a,
Yes.
for a murder. Okay, I had occasion to visit Northwestern Hospital. I'm going to name names. Northwestern Hospital there in Sycamore DeKalb. I've been there for treatment on different occasions, impressed with the staff, impressed with my doctors there. I walked up to the door and it was the flags, both the hospital purple flag and the American flag were at half staff. And I gasped, I choked.
I saw it driving down the highway,
I'm,
and I did the same thing.
I'm kind of speechless. And I went in and unfortunately talked to a young lady behind the reception desk who didn't deserve my
It
obvious
wasn't her
lack of
decision.
her, you know. And I said, I just don't understand that. Do you treat homosexuals here? Do you have homosexuals on your staff? Do you have Middle Eastern? Do you have Black? Do you have women? Do you have volunteers who are my age? It just, that whole notion of lowering a flag.
Yeah.
What is your purpose?
So not only was he admittedly and unashamedly and publicly homophobic, he was
Hmm.
also racist.
Hmm.
And you said, do you have blacks and black women? Do you treat? And we'll point out that one of the more egregious things he said was um, prominent black women
Hmm.
like Joy Reid,
Hmm.
Ketanji Brown
Yeah,
Jackson, Sheila Jackson Lee, the elected representative, Michelle Obama,
yeah,
have all talked openly about the benefit to them of affirmative action.
right,
And they're not saying they got their position of power and authority from affirmative action. What they're saying is they got their
got
opportunity
their
from
opportunity.
that. And being given the opportunity and being able then to prove yourself worthy are two very different things.
Right,
But that's a distinction Charlie Kirk never made. And this is what he said. Yeah, we know, meaning we
right,
know that you benefited from affirmative action. You don't have, this is an exact quote, you don't have the brain power
right.
to otherwise be taken seriously. And you have to steal a white person's slot in order for you to be where you are.
Right. I've heard that. I've heard it reposted, and I remind myself that this is a young man who didn't finish college in Illinois, um, and didn't go back, didn't acquire another degree. And I'm not saying a college degree is a measure. There are plenty of people in
Measure of
there.
intellect, a measure of worth, a
Others
measure.
are self-taught.
Right.
Um,
And he's clearly, he was brilliant. He was a smart guy.
See, there again, it's really hard when you're mincing intellect and morality. You might call it
And
Christianity, but hate speech, Hitler's hate speech, he may have been a prominent speaker. He may have been a good speaker. He was in German. I don't understand it, but he certainly got a good response.
if anybody's interested, the now deceased comedian Norm Macdonald does a series of routines on Hitler
Right,
and his oratorical
right.
abilities that
Mi-
are
mi-
hilarious. Look it up for him on
Mincing the
YouTube.
words and mixing up the words. Yeah. But so, you know, o- oratory ability is not necessarily a significant indicator of intelligence or good humor, morality,
I
like
don't
I
think
said.
Charlie will ever be remembered for his good humor.
It just, I mean, he found a ready and willing audience and made a small fortune on milking it.
Right.
And now we're left with the results. And another thing, if he can be flown on Air Force Two Lion State and have a statue. Uh, uh,
At our
there's
nation's capital.
there's no
Are you
words.
kidding me?
There's just no, I have no words to explain this or define it or understand it. I simply do not.
So I'm going to stay on the aftermath of Charlie Kirk, but switch directions a little
Mhm.
bit and attention away from Charlie and attention now on the president and his response. He went on Fox News and he was asked by one of the hosts of the show there what he's going to do to unify the nation in what is sort of unfolding across the American landscape in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's murder. And his response is, I couldn't care less, right? While following that up with clear declarations about the problem being the left.
Mhm.
And now assigning to departments in his government the task of identifying organizations on the left as domestic terrorists.
Right.
Now, first, I want to get your reaction to that, and then I'm going to contrast that with another historical figure.
Well, I think overall and generally, faux President Trump doesn't really understand uh, the government, his role in it. I feel there's a lack of understanding there. But I think he would prefer a civil war because I think he feels that he would profit most from that.
Hmm.
And he probably doesn't care because he'd like to throw the bones of caring to his sycophantic supporters and give them something to work on. That would be another thought I had. And then, well, his wife didn't care. She wore the coat that showed that. So I mean,
Right.
it just goes along with that. But he also, his depth of feeling for virtually anything or any person is demonstrated by a reporter asked him how he was feeling now that he lost his good friend Charlie Kirk. He said something like, heartbroken. And did you notice we're building the great golden ballroom over there? And the trucks are already there, and we're, making great strides.
A true sign of empathy and grief.
I have a real problem with that. Yeah.
So, in contrast, we know of another president who served in a time of great division in
Hmm.
this country. In fact, one that did lead to civil war.
Hmm.
And 2 years before he was elected, he was running for the Senate seat that Stephen Douglas beat him
Hmm.
for. But he gave his House divided speech. A
Hmm.
house divided against itself cannot stand. And in a minute, I'm going to quote his second inaugural address, which was 4 years into his
Hmm.
presidency in the throes of the Civil War. But before we do, I just want to contrast a house divided against itself cannot stand with the current president saying he couldn't care less about
Hmm.
uniting this country.
Hmm.
It's just heartbreaking to me.
Well, it's mechanical, it's profit driven, it's
Transactional.
transactional. It shows no respect for history. You don't have to agree with history, the different positions, but you have to at least understand cause and effect of history. But I don't think he knows it. I don't think he cares about it. I see a person who cares about his own bottom line, period.
Yeah, there was a recent New York Times reporter who did some deep research, and this would have been 6 months into the presidency, so late July, early August. And by that time, his conservative estimate was that this
Hmm.
president had already profited $3.5 million from
No, I would
his
suspect
time in
it's quite a
office.
bit higher than that. But
We
our
all do.
newest product is fight, fight, fight. Men, you can buy the cologne. It's
Can't wait to
only
get mine.
$199 or, $299. And it goes along with, the beans and the
Watches, the shoes, the
the
steaks.
high tops, the vodka, just.
So that going back to Lincoln,
Right.
in that second inaugural address, which was attended by none other than John Wilkes Booth,
Yeah.
right? 1 month before he would shoot the president. These are the words. And he's talking about the pain of a country now not only divided, but which has shed blood in defense of its point of view. And he's talked about the institution, not the institution person, but the evil of slavery in that second inaugural address, saying things like, if the blood that we shed on the battlefield is to be equivalent to the 250 years of treatment of these enslaved peoples, and what God is asking for is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, then the pain of this moment is far from over. And he said, if what God is asking for is just compensation, then until every nickel earned by these slave owners is returned, God will not. He says that. But then he says this about a house divided that cannot stand. He says at the end, with malice towards none, with charity for all, holding firmly to the right as God sees fit to show us the right, let us strive to heal the wounds of this nation. My God, that's beautiful. And to find every way possible for us to achieve a just and lasting peace between ourselves and all peoples. Contrast that with, I couldn't care less.
I don't remember if someone told me this or I read it recently, and I just don't jot down all the citations. I probably could. But they said, the United States is a savage nation. And how can you say that? I mean, we are such an open and welcoming immigrant, humanitarian aid, and we're generous. We're patriotic, we're out there in parades and love our flag. Not enough to hug it in public, but to wave it. And and I look at how he's behaving, and well, there's a savage person for you.
That
Because
reelected.
there's a person who he says he doesn't care, but clearly he prefers that.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not hard to look under the surface. It's not hard to dig down deep about this kind of person and his beliefs. I just find it very offensive. And I know we're going to talk about this, and we're always going to be talking about my friends from 50 years ago in high school and my childhood friends and my new friends and neighbors are always asking, okay, I get it. What are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? I ask myself all the time, what can I do? What should I do? Some action that won't cause other people harm, that won't put them in harm's way because of my actions. If I rally and people around me are rallying, it's because they all made the choice to rally in the same way that I am. But I'm always double thinking my actions so that they're positive and not harming someone else.
Good for you.
Now, I feel like speaking out in opposition to President Trump is hardly anti-democratic.
And certainly not anti-American.
It's certainly not anti-American because we need the opposition. Oppositional voices help to clarify and define. So we cannot do without them, or we're asking ourselves to turn it all over and just be slaves and serfs and mindless robots. That's what we're saying.
Well, in terms of what we can do we've learned this from history. It is important for voices willing to speak. Silence is complicity.
Hmm.
Um, and it is important to maintain hope, to believe that with the very little that we can contribute, nonetheless, its contribution moves us closer to that arc of history that bends towards justice. The day we stop, the day that the people who passionately believe in the rights of others, the dignity of others, stop speaking, stop doing their simple acts of kindness and compassion and lose hope, is when it's over.
And I honestly, when I look at the demonstrations in our cities,
Yes.
I mean, I am cheered and
Encouraged, uplifted.
more hopeful. I'm
Yes.
so proud of them. I'm so happy for them. When I see the response in European cities, mob scenes for
Right.
miles, and the UK certainly is not holding back.
No, they're
And
not.
yay.
I want one of those inflatable baby Trump dolls with the diapers on them.
And they're throwing a big Vance ball out into the audience. I mean, a lot of that is theater, and I get that.
Yes, but theater matters.
But still, how many hundreds of thousands of people are making their voices heard? And I saw a report this morning of Londoners on the street saying, well, if the king wants to trot Trump around in a golden carriage within the bounds of Windsor Castle, probably thinks it's outside in London. Nobody's going to tell him differently. But, like, go with it, but we're not going with you on this item. So, yes, that gives me hope. It really does. And the Canadians, they're speaking up. Their prime minister and Charlie Angus, yay.
Yay.
Canada.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Well, I think we've come to the end of this week's conversation. I don't want to leave without asking you about your shirt.
Oh yes, I have a shirt every week. Well, you can read it.
Save democracy, resist, persist, prevail. We always end with the last word. Do you want that to be your last word?
Well, I saw a bumper sticker.
Oh,
and
let's see that.
Okay, do I show it?
Yeah.
Okay, when the people lead, the leaders will follow. And that's why I have so much hope for each one of us doing something to do our part to literally save our democracy and then restore it. Because we're going to have a lot of repair work to do. But this is first. So we have to lead.
And my last word is, remember, we are in this together. We are going to get through this. We need each other. Thanks for listening. We are the poet, the pastor, and the pundit, opining as always on the intersection of faith and politics. Until next week, thank you.
Thank you.
That was our podcast this week. Be sure to tune in next week for another edition of the poet, the pastor, and the pundit, opining on the intersections of faith and politics. Thank you for listening.